Gianluca, you confirm you see my screen with the full presentation?
Yeah,
Yes, okay.
you can see
Good.
the slide, yeah.
Perfect.
Can I start?
Yeah, we see quite a few people. I don't know if Sarah, do you have anybody in the lobby?
I
Hello,
put it
good morning.
open so anyone can join. So
Okay.
everyone should be in already.
Okay. Well then, yes. Welcome everyone, and Anka, you can indeed start as people are joining slowly the meeting.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gianluca and Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual info day, also from my side. My name is Angelia Campanu. I'm the head of Unit B4 of CINEA, which deals with the Connecting Europe Facility for Energy program and the Renewable Energy Financing Mechanism. In our agency, the full name of our agency, just in case you don't know it, is European Climate Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency. The Connecting Europe Facility program, CEF, supports infrastructure and collectivity in Europe across the three sectors of transport, energy, and digital. For the current funding period, which lasts until 2027 and started in 2021, a new category of eligible projects is available to apply under the CEF Energy program, the cross-border renewable projects in the field of renewable energy, referred to as cross-border renewable energy projects, or CBRES, as we call them. Alongside my colleagues in DG ENER and here in CINEA with the team, I would like to open the info day of the fourth CEF Energy call for cross-border renewable projects works and studies. This info day will cover the priorities of the 2026 call for studies and works for cross-border renewable projects, and has been published on the 4th of November 2025, but will only be open for submission as of the 5th of February 2026. This call has a available budget of 150 million euros to support cross-border renewables projects in terms of studies and works. And the deadline for submission of your applications will be the 12th of March 2026 at 5 p.m. in Brussels. And now I will take you a little bit through the agenda, but before that, let me just quickly introduce my team here in CINEA. From three colleagues you will hear throughout this morning today. So Gianluca Ferreri is the coordinator of the policy. And you will hear a presentation from him a bit later. Then in the team, we also have Teresa Koenig and Luisa Papamikruli. And you will also hear presentations from them a bit later. But I need to also introduce you to our colleague Maria Spandu, who is our call coordinator. So she is organizing, kindly organizing everything for us in terms of the evaluation. It's a person you need to know as well, although you will not hear a presentation from her today. So as you can see in the agenda, after my short opening, colleagues in DG ENER, Victor will lead us through the policy context and call objectives. Then we will hear about the evaluation and selection process, what it means to have a successful proposal, how to deal with budget and procurement, information about the model grant agreement. Then we will have a Q&A with you, where hopefully we will be able to set aside everything that is not clear on your side. In terms of housekeeping rules, this meeting will be recorded. The question and answer session will be at the end, so you can write your questions in the chat as time flies when you have a question, or raise your hand during the Q&A. But it will be at the end, so after the presentations are done. And the participants will receive the slides and the link to the recording after the meeting, so you don't have to worry about taking very extensive notes. And with that, let's move on to my short introduction of the call. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the Connecting Europe Facility program for this multi-annual financial framework between 2021 and 2027 has 3 fields: digital, transport, and energy. The CBLS call belongs, of course, to the energy part, where the budget is of 5.84 billion for this MFF, and it's split between projects of common interest and projects of mutual interest under the 10E policy of the Union and cross-border renewable projects. Moving on, just to give you an overview of the projects that have received the cross-border renewable status so far. You see them on the screen. A few of them are still undergoing the scrutiny period with the Parliament and the Council, and this is why the call, the deadline for the submission of the applications in the call only starts after the scrutiny period is over, and when the new list of cross-border renewable status projects will enter into force, so that more projects have the possibility to submit their applications. As you see on the screen, there are 5 offshore wind projects, both radial and hybrid. 1 is about floating wind technology. 2 onshore wind projects, physically crossing the border. 2 cities district heating projects, physically crossing the border. 2 projects focusing on power to X. 1 hydraulic run-of-river project, also physically crossing the border, and 1 solar PV project located in third countries. And then, as the last slide of my brief introduction, it's a bit of an overview of the CEF program so far. So the CEF program CEF Energy program started in 2014. It's already had its 10-year anniversary, and it supported 224 actions with a total EU funding of 8.1 billion euros. And you can see on the screen a bit how these amounts and actions were split by sectors. Just to say that, of course, with the Green Deal and with the revision of the 10-year regulation in 2022, natural gas projects are no longer eligible, with 2 exceptions linked to Malta and Cyprus. But hydrogen and electrolyzer projects have become eligible. So that's the novelty brought by the revision of the 10-year regulation in 2022. Otherwise, I will not read out the amounts. You will have the slide in any event. So thanks a lot for listening, and let me now pass the floor to Victor with the policy context.
Thank you, Anka, for this introduction. I hope you can hear me well. Victor Charbonnier. I'm working in ENER in the unit C1, which is dedicated to renewable energy and energy system integration policy. I will remind you about how the CBRS program fits into the wider policy background and agenda of the European Commission. So it's really a program that's framed by key initiatives on competitiveness and decarbonization. We'll start with the 2021 long-term goal for reaching climate neutrality by 2050. That was endorsed by the EU and translated in a proposed target of 55% reduction of the greenhouse gas emission, and that needs to be achieved by 2030. That's the so-called Fit for 55 package. So that's the first bullet point on this slide. And a bit earlier this year, the Commission published the Clean Industrial Deal together with an affordable energy action plan, which has the objectives to lower energy prices and really to turn decarbonization into a driver of growth for European industries, meaning that it aims to speed up the rollout of clean energy, accelerate electrification, complete the internal energy markets with physical interconnection, and use energy more efficiently to cut dependence on imported fossil fuels. In the next slide, so those two initiatives are really the cornerstones of EU energy policy, but another key initiative that shaped the agenda was also REPowerEU, which had the objective to accelerate the road of renewable energy across technology and sectors to reduce the dependency to notably Russian fossil fuel imports after the crisis of 2022. And in this context, the Renewable Energy Directive was revised and adopted in December 2023. And it raises the ambition for renewable energy with a new binding target of 42.5% in its final energy demand by 2030. It also introduced some concrete measures, notably on permitting, where procedures are to be accelerated and streamlined. And in general, you can see with this list of measures that the increased ambition can only be achieved with some sort of holistic approach where you really engage with all sectors of the economy, but also you ensure that member states engage with each other to make the most of the resources of renewable energy where they are located across the continent, where they are cheap and abundant. In the previous Renewable Energy Directive, this cross-border cooperation was left on purely voluntary basis with unequal progresses so far. While in RED 3, you have the introduction of some mandatory obligations on the member states, notably in the Article 9, to agree on establishing cooperation framework on joint projects for the production of renewable electricity or renewable heating and cooling. And they have to do that by end of December this year. And this should be followed up by other obligations, notably to endeavor to agree on developing 2 joint projects by 2030. And there's an additional obligation for those member states that have an annual electricity consumption of more than 100 terawatt hour to develop a 3rd project by 2033. So those obligations really feeds in a pipeline of projects that eventually the CBRS program will provide financial supports incentive to. And they really meant to complement addition to the domestic efforts of the member states, and they not only efforts vis-a-vis the achievement of the EURES target, but also in terms of strengthening the security of energy supply of the member states. In the next slide, you will see that besides the decarbonization objectives, the cross-border programs should also contribute to other objectives a lot in the CEF regulation from 2021, and that's currently under review as part of the next MFF discussion. Notably that there should be a facilitation, a contribution to the uptake of innovative RES technologies. In particular, CBRS projects should also tap into the potential for offshore wind, open a possibility for cooperation in heating and cooling, and should in general help building a cost-effective integration of the renewables in the system, notably by adding storage or energy conversion facilities, Power to X, as written in the slide. Anka mentioned that we update the list of CBRS projects every year with the support of CINEA based on the new application we receive. We have 5 new projects added to the list this year. If the scrutiny period ends without objections in late December, it will enter into force in January 2026, and these projects will become eligible for CEF energy funding for studies and works. And I would say for which there is still a significant budget envisaged until the end of this MFF. We have revised the multi-annual work program for the remaining 3 years of the MFF, where there will be 3 calls, one of which was mentioned is not published, and each of them has an indicative budget of 150 million euros. Next and last slide, sorry, to reflect on key policy considerations attached to this call for proposal. Note that there is a certain degree of flexibility regarding the scope of studies application, although it has to be fully justified vis-à-vis the eligibility conditions that are set forth by, on one side, the delegated regulation that establishes the specific selection criteria for CBRS projects, as well as the call text itself, of course. So we do have a focus on REST components, but you may consider the integration of non-REST components if you demonstrate an interplay with the REST component. For works, the conditions are a bit stricter. No other components than those listed in the technical documentation that will accompany the CBR list and which will be published on ENEA website at the same time than the publication of the list to the official journal of the EU will be eligible for funding. And those components that are non-RES will have a lower priority than the RES component. So please keep this in mind when preparing and submitting your applications. I will leave it here and hand over the floor to the senior colleagues.
Thank you, Victor. And I will take over the next part on the evaluation process and our criteria. So through this presentation, we will look a little bit at the time plan and of the call, and then really go into the details of each on every step and what are the conditions in terms of eligibility, admissibility, and then what are our criteria, and so on and so forth. So we'll look at it at the details. So first of all, the indicative timeline. The call was published, as we said, in November, and today we have the info day, but it will officially open for submission only in February, so on the 5th of February, and then there will be a good, roughly five weeks to submit the project via the online portal. We'll look at it in a moment. By the way, regarding how to submit, we have produced a video. Maria has produced a video on really guiding you, like sort of a tutorial that we will share it after the meeting together with the presentation. We thought that it would be more useful that you look at it when you will start working it, or slightly before, so rather in January, rather than having a more theoretical representation at this stage. So, but you will have a step-by-step tutorial on how to apply in case you don't know, you haven't done it probably the first time, or maybe you want a refresher. So the idea is to have this fairly long publication period, so you can have access to all call conditions, knowing that they will not change compared to the previous year. So you can also look at the previous year templates to have an understanding and start preparing your project. Whereas in February, between the 5th of February and the 12th of March, you have the time to concretely submit the proposal via the online portal. There will be an evaluation period between mid-March and June-July, and then the last steps are the CEF coordination committee to take place indicatively in July, and then over summer we will start launching of the preparation of the grant agreement with the selected project, with an expected date of signature, or period of signature that will be around October, November next year. In the next slide, you'll see the various steps exactly regarding the application itself. So First of all, when we receive an application, we look at the whether it is admissible or eligible, and then only admissible and eligible proposals are actually evaluated against our criteria, and also evaluated in terms of operation and later on financial capacity. I will tell a moment what it is in a moment what I mean by later on financial capacity. Then there is an evaluation committee in the Commission, a draft list of proposal, and in the next slide you will see also the following steps after the evaluation committee. There is internal process in the Commission. There is an inter-service consultation of other Director General of the Commission, then the consultation of the CEF Coordination Committee, and then we get into the actual adoption of the selection decision and the start of the grant agreement preparation. So these are the main steps, and also explains a little bit, I hope, the timeline. So what happens basically after March submission? There is this 3-4 months that are needed to do all these steps, as I briefly explained today. So in the admissibility and eligibility, in the next slide you'll see on the admissibility elements, it's roughly you need to submit it by the deadline within via the portal, so the funding and tender portal, and there's no alternative for that. If you miss the deadline, you simply are out. So really make sure not to work on the last moment. You will see in the tutorial from Maria also that you can submit at any point in time in the portal and reopen and complete again the application fine-tuned. So as soon as you have a stable application, please to submit it even 1 or 2 weeks before the deadline, because you can always reopen and redraft and update and do the last versioning at the end closer to the deadline. And we will evaluate the latest officially submitted version, not the first one. So no paper submission, only via the portal, and then admissibility is about completeness, so no missing documents, there's no really a follow-up, only in very specific cases, and so that the documents are readable, accessible, printable, and watch out about the maximum page limit, because the system cuts at 121 pages. So if you run over, we will simply not see, the evaluator will simply not see the pages after the following pages after the 120th. So in the next slide, you can see the main topics. This is no surprise. Studies or works. If you look for a definition, it's in Article 2 of the CEF regulation. For both, you have the definition of studies and the definition of works, but I guess nothing very surprising there. On the studies, you have a wide array of possible technical studies that depends very much on the maturity of the action that you propose. It might be really on the early stage, or like feasibility studies, or much more advanced, even up to the FEED, and then studies that are very close to the FID decision. For works, it's the actual really construction. In the case of CBRS project, is really building up the installations that you bring forward, so depending on the component of the project. Next slide, you'll see a little reminder that, I mean, in CBRS, your project have acquired a status in the last call or in previous calls. It's always very important when you develop an action to request CEF support that you really situate this action into the wider picture of the CBRS status project, how this action contributes to the wider picture of the CBRS project, how it is the next logical step, and so really make it explicit and clear, so that you can see really a thread in the proposal linked it to the project that has acquired the status. So in the next slide, we touch upon what already Victor hinted to. So you may have basically two components possible, either the res generation components or the non-res generation component, provided that they comply with the Article 3 of the Delegated Act, the one that talks about the fact that non-CBRS component needs to form an integral part of the project, effectively enable the integration of it, and is ancillary compared to the renewable generation facility. It has also to be part of the technical documentation and in general of the project that is approved for the status. So as Victor already said, the focus should really be on the res generation, but the non-res component is where it respects these conditions can be part of an action. So you can have either an action that really fully focuses on the res generation aspect, or you can also have other components, a mix of them, so that there is a flexibility there. In the next slide, you'll see some examples, but I think you already got them. So probably a little bit from less mature to most mature. In the timeline, you may start to have feasibility studies, but then you may need to have more technical studies, on-site studies, geophysical, geotechnical studies, seabed studies, and you name it. So there are many possibilities of studies in res project, as you know, and these are all potentially eligible if they fit into your project. And the next slide, I'll touch upon on the works scope. So on the res part, it can be really the building up of the res facility, being either civil works or really the actual construction, being solar PV installation or wind or any other renewable energy sources that is part of your project. And on the non-res component, you may have grid connection related component if they are, again, in line with the Article 2 of the Delegated Act and foreseen in the technical documentation. You may have specifically to your project some restriction, so keep those in mind. But there can be also storage, commercial facilities. Again, same consideration here as for the grid connection. So these are only examples that can help to give you a little bit of concreteness of it if you're not so familiar with our program. Okay, digging into the eligibility itself, and then the of the participant, and the rest of the evaluation. So for participants, there is no really specific restriction, the main being that the participant needs to be a legal entity, maybe public or private or anything in between, and established in one of the eligible countries. That normally is EU member state or non-EU member state that are associated to CEF or part of the EEA countries, but it can be also obviously third countries if that's deemed essential for the action to take place. So obviously where we have, if there is a CBRS project with third country cooperation, then we may have also this situation there. For the operational capacity, this is also checked in the framework of the evaluation, and it's really about ensuring that beneficiaries have, or the future beneficiaries or applicants at the evaluation stage have know-how, qualification, and resources that are necessary and sufficient to implement the project. So be mindful of the various application form section, particularly in section 3.1. There's a whole part where you can really explain the experience, the complementarities of the experiences of the participants of the consortium, if it is a consortium, or the applicant if it is a mono beneficiary application, and then the other element that the evaluation look at it to assess the the operational capacity, it's about it's the use of the activity report normally of last year, or let's say of the latest approved one. So you may not have the very last year, and in that case you simply attach the one that is approved. Now here there's been sometimes misunderstanding in CBRS. So in the next slide I wanted to make it crystal clear. So we are really talking about corporate reports. So I took some pictures of corporate reports you may recognize in your respective organizations. So it's really about the annual corporate report of the organization. We are not really talking about the CBRS status report. So this annual report that we asked to submit about the CBRS project itself, but it's really about the organization. That's why we talk about let's say the corporate reports. So again, you may not have the very latest year. So 2025 application, it's submission. It's in March. Maybe in many cases you don't have the audited, or in any event, you don't have the approved one. If you don't have the approved one, you would submit the one from 2024, for example. And that's all right. In the framework of the capacity assessment, operational capacity assessment, it's important to indicate the list of previous projects. So you have a specific section in the application form, Annex 4. There's a table there. Don't forget to list the main relevant project. Don't have to make a list of 100 projects, but really focus on the most important that are relevant for the topic you are presenting in the action. Okay, then the financial capacity. The idea is to have an analysis of whether the applicants have stable and sufficient resources on financial term. So in this case, it is checked mostly during the grant preparation. It is done at that stage because in case you're part of the main list of projects or projects that are proposed for approval, you will be contacted by the central validation body to provide a series of financial documents and to prove indeed this the financial capacity. There are a few exceptions which are normally in CBRS not applicable, but in CEF in general, indeed you have, for example, TSO are exempted for that. Yeah, we may have public bodies in the potential applicants. So in those cases, these are exempted. Also, individual requested the grant amount when it's lower than 60,000 euro, but that's very rare in the case of works and study application in the CBRS CEF Energy. So in the next slide, a few tips or few plea to anticipate as much as possible eventually a problem of financial capacity, a weak financial capacity. In case you would see that there might be a risk of weak financial capacity, and I'll come to that in a moment in the next slide, but the first here, consider alternatives, so mitigation measures. Already at the application phase will be great because that really helps smoothing the grant agreement preparation process. So if, for example, your organization is part of a wider group, maybe there's a possibility for the parent company to step into the consortium, and maybe there's a possibility to swap roles between what would be the coordinator and the beneficiary. Because in case the coordinator has a weak financial capacity, well, you either don't get pre-financing or you do it, but you may need to give bank guarantees on the whole pre-financing amount, which it's very costly for you, for the coordinator, and it's not easy to obtain. Or in some cases, there can be possibility to do third-party guarantee, but it's a little bit more limited, or try to go for a liability regime specific to this case. So, but all these are kind of painful steps. So if we can avoid it in the grant agreement preparation phase, if in case your project is approved, then it's just much better for you. And therefore, keep it in mind at the application phase. How do you do it? In the next slide, you have suggestion on to use. There is a financial capacity self-assessment tool in the funding and tender portal. When you will receive the slide, you will see that there is a direct link here in the slide, but otherwise you can Google it, LFV simulation funding tender portal, and you should be able to find it. A tip for the coordinator would be to insert the data, your financial data, but also to add as a debt the potential pre-financing amount of your project. So of course you need to have the information on how much you're going to ask for a total grant amount at the moment you do the simulation, because this will be it's a factor that is included in the analysis during the grant agreement preparation. So if you do all these steps, it's likely that you won't have any problem of financial capacity assessment during the grant agreement preparation. Things can be much quicker and smoother. All right, then we go into our criteria. So the concrete criteria that are used for the assessment of the project. There are 5 of our criteria. Each of them have a minimum pass score of 3. The scoring goes from 0 to 5. So that means that in case there's any criteria, a criterion that gets a score lower than 3, so 2, 1, or 0, regardless of the total score, the project will be rejected. So minimum pass score for each of the 5, and then therefore the minimum pass score total will be 15, but with each of the criterion getting at least 3, and the maximum is 25. So if we go through one by one, the first one, it's about the priority and urgency of the action. It's really more of a policy analysis. So the project needs to demonstrate that the proposal corresponds to the sectoral policy targets, objective and priorities, and notably it aligns with the achievement of the EU target for 2030 climate and energy target in order to reach climate neutrality objective by 2050. So it's really to look how the project corresponds to the policy priority and how the project delivers to it, and how urgently it does it. So whether it's something that is really going to happen soon. As Victor was underlying, it's important to know that directly in this criterion there are impact for projects that have either a RES generation component as key component, or conversely have a more non-RES generation component, because for the RES generation component they will get proportionally higher score, all other conditions being equal. So in this case, there is a clear prioritization. Then if we go to maturity, it's really about assessing what the project, first of all, is the next step, or next logical step in the CBRS project development, and then how mature is the project in terms of ability, readiness to start by the proposed starting date, and complete by the proposed ending date. In the application form, there are many sections that are there to really clarify what are the preliminary steps that you have taken. And typically, probably one of the most important sections, it's really about for both studies and works, about the procurement procedures and in general subcontracting procedure, because very often in works and studies you have quite a big amount of subcontracting share in both in the budget and in the tasks. So there it's important to really clarify what are your internal procedure? How long does it take to procure a certain project, a certain study or a certain task? What have you done already? Have you started already some procurement steps? Where are you with them? And what about the future one? Have you planned? What is the planning? Do you have a clear view on all of those? All those contracts and setup. So it's important really to show that you are ready to start by the starting date that you propose. Also, if you have information about the cooperation mechanism updates, whether that really depends on the type of application. If you come for works, of course we expect to see also the cooperation agreement, but also for studies we would like to see also further steps going ahead. And then if there are already pending legal, administrative, technical issues as I said, in the procurement, if you expect any of those, it's good to show also that you're in command of all these potential factors of delay. Now, in the next slide, to make it even crystal clear, it's a recurrent question. What do we mean mature by when? So when project should start? So here you see a little bit of a scheme. It's take it as a rule of thumb. It's not a black and white hard rule. So there's always a case by case analysis. But so roughly for studies, we would expect for a mature project to start at the latest by the month 6 from the call closure. So from March, and when we talk about starting, it's not about just management or as more activities, but really the core task. So the same reasoning goes for works, but with a longer time frame. For obvious reason, there we would, I mean, a mature project normally starts at the latest with core activities around 1 year from the call closure up to 18 months. That's more or less the timing we see mature project starting the core task in works. More or less. So again, that's a rule of thumb. There can be a little bit of flexibility there, not huge though. So and the earlier the better. So of course, if we see works application that starts and they are realistically starting in month 6, 7, or 8, for example, is just a positive element, of course. Okay, then we look at the quality criterion, and it's really about evaluating the soundness, the overall soundness of the proposal, whether the resources are sufficient, both in terms of financial resources, human resources, whether it is clear who is behind the project, how will be set up the project management, what are the various groups that are foreseen to manage the project, overall the architecture, and then it's also looking into the coherence between the various elements, between the various work packages, content work packages, whether the timing makes sense, if there is a sequential logic, whether this logic is respected and is also clarified and make it clear, or at least self-explainable, and whether the risks are identified and are also mitigated, or at least there are measures in place foreseen. So this whole set of analysis is done in the quality. In the next slide, we see in the impact, it's an analysis of assessing whether the project has a real need to overcome financial obstacles, typically the one generated by insufficient commercial availability, a high upfront cost, lack of market finance, difficult bankability, things like that. So really make it very clear what is your financial obstacle or obstacles, and why these are obstacles that cannot be overcome without public funding, and in particularly without CEF funding. Also, the cross-border dimension is assessed in this context. So how this support will impact at cross-border level, and it will be looked for works, in particular, really the demonstration of the non-commercial availability, and also the assessment of the impact, a wider impact of the project in terms of economic, social, environmental impact, climate impact, whether the project will be climate proof. So these all elements are in particular scrutinized for works proposal. In the catalytic effect, there it is about really, if you like, determining what is the financial gap of the project. So there it's important to really demonstrate that there is a financial gap, and demonstrate that this is the amount you really need, and also clearly explain how the grant will facilitate the project or will accelerate it. So it's also important that we understand whether the CEF money it will help accelerate even the project, and also indicate if there is any other EU support, for example, on the RRF facility. So to close this part with the last focus on the gap, funding gap for works, because this is a typical important and crucial aspect of the evaluation in works. Make sure really to demonstrate non-commercial availability, and how to do it in particular is really to make use of your business plan and the related business plan financial spreadsheet. So there are many variables to indicate that are indicated in the third bullet point. Key parameters that needs to be determined on basis of assumptions that you will have to make it explicit as much as possible in the business plan, and there so financial discount rate, reference period, capex, opex, all these variables. Really make sure that you not simply indicate a figure without really explaining it, where it comes from, but make it explicit your assumptions, why you consider these figures. Is it based on data you have? Is it based on available studies that are publicly available? If they are publicly available, put the link. So really make sure that the evaluator has got all the elements to understand your reasoning, and then it will make his or her mind up whether they agree with your assumptions there. If you got already previous CEF funding, make sure to factor them in, because when it's about source of financing, you need to factor all the CEF funding that you got so far. It is a cumulative element there, and the cumulative CEF support cannot be higher of what is the translated is the gap funding gap. Basically, what you will see in the spreadsheet, that is called negative FNPV, so financial net present value. So that's a very important part of the evaluation, in particular for works. So now wrapping up, just quickly on the evaluation results on the next couple of slides. The evaluation result will be received via letter, and you will receive via the portal. It doesn't constitute a formal commitment for funding because we have the grant agreement preparation, as I explained before, all the steps, financial capacity, and all the rest. But it's an invitation to start the grant preparation report, grant preparation of your project. Sorry, and regarding the notification, note that notifications that have not been opened for within 10 days are considered to have been accessed. So you have a deadline specified in the notification, and this is important, especially in case you consider if you would consider the evaluation process was flawed and you want to submit a complaint, you have to do it within a given time. So in the next slide, a few bullet points on the grant preparation. Many of you already have gone through those, so I've already been selected in previous call for the new one. So the grant preparation, it's a phase that lasts a few months normally, and it's an iterative process where we meet, we have a dialogue, we try to fine-tune technical and financial aspect of the proposal. We try to tackle what are the main elements as for consideration coming from the evaluation summary report. There may be environmental conditionalities linked to your project that we need to tackle also in the grant agreement preparation. That's why it may take a little bit of time, and that's why indicated in previous slides, expected timing of signature around October, November next year. If you want to have a look at the model grant agreement for those who are new, it's also available online, and it will be available also in the call page. So that you can download it and you can even circulate it internally, legal department or whatever, if you want to anticipate any discussion later on discussion. Okay, that was for my part. I see already there are some questions in the chat. We'll tackle them at the end, but please go ahead with submitting questions in the chat. Maybe also an advice, if for those you can, if you can edit your display name next to your to the name of in the participants, so that we can see for all of you the full name, and also if you can indicate in brackets your project, so it will be easier than for the discussion later on the Q&A. Might give some element of background that can be useful. With that, I hand it over to Teresa for the next part on drafting and submitting your proposal.
Yes, thank you very much, Gianluca. Good morning from my side. I will, in the following presentation, walk you through how to best draft and submit your proposal. And we have clustered this part into 3 different sections. First, the terminology, then the quality of the proposal, and in the end, the applicant checklist. Let's start with terminology. So when it comes to the project, we are using the terms project and action synonymously. But in your application, clearly state whether you're referring to your proposed action, that is what you are applying with under this call, or are you referring to the envisaged CBRES project that was also already put on Gianluca's slide in the presentation before. It's very important to make this distinction, and also so that we know how your action is going to contribute to. Then the term work package. Work package is a major subdivision of your project. It could be, for example, work package on project management, a preparation of the CBA. And the work packages can run in parallel or be sequential. And let's look into the next terms. That's the task. So every work package is subdivided in like one or more tasks. That could be, for example, the project monitoring, could be drafting of cooperation agreement, and it helps to structure your work packages. One aspect that's important to highlight in your application, and you will see it here, is the estimate percentage of subcontracting for each task. And yeah, just a note here, do not define subtask because this is already like the finest division is already a task, so don't define subtasks. If you look further in the terminology, we still have milestones and deliverables. Milestones are major control points in the project that help to chart progress. So it helps you to see where you are in your action, but it also helps us when monitoring your project to see where you are and where you plan to be. That could be, for example, a tender publication or an award decision. So basically an intermediate step. Whereas a deliverable is a project output. It does not necessarily need to be linked to a milestone, and it is in the end of the task. But we come to that also further in the presentation. So it could be, for example, a finalized geological study or finalized pre-FEED. So you have some examples here. Important is that they're complementary in content and timing. So don't overlap milestones and deliverables, but I will give you more examples later on. Let's look into the next part of the section, which is the quality of the proposal. And Gianluca already gave some advice here. This really also having the reader and the evaluators in mind. What are they looking for? So first, like make sure that it's simple language, understandable language, avoid jargon, and be as clear as possible. Second, make sure that the information is easy to find. As we said already, the evaluation is based solely on the content provided in the application form, and no assumptions will be made or additional requests for information. Then make sure that all the mandatory annexes are there. And if you want to support your application with additional information, that could be, for example, relevant maps or graphs, which are voluntary annexes. Let's have a look a bit further into the intervention logic of the project. So a good application will answer several questions. For example, what is the project about? What are the technical parameters? Who will carry out the project? How and when will the project objectives be reached? And why you're proposing this action? What are the expected results of the project? And in the next slide, we have provided you with some examples to those different sections. So, for example, your action could be about an engineering study to acquire data needed for the FEED stage. And who could be carrying out the action? In that case, here we have two beneficiaries. One would carry out the study, and the beneficiary two could be constructing windmills via subcontracting. How and when would that be carried out? That is defined in the work packages through the task, milestones, and deliverables, with, for example, an aim of a fully functioning RES installation with X capacity or it could be as an aim to have the approval of the permitting documents. So here again, clearly explain how the action will contribute to the CBRS status project. Let's also look into the consortium setup. If you're, for example, only one beneficiary, it's a bit easier in the sense then there is only one beneficiary, and this beneficiary is automatically the coordinator. But in the case you have several beneficiaries, then one beneficiary needs to have the specific role as a coordinator, and with this will also come specific responsibilities. So it's important to think within your consortium before how you want to set up the consortium. So it's like, yeah, advisable to think which entity could be most suited to take up this role. So some elements to consider here are the operational capacity, the financial capacity, and the involvement in the project. And then also already consider at the application stage and when you set up the project, if you want to consider also affiliated entities. What are affiliated entities? They have a similar role to beneficiaries, but let's say consider them to be a beneficiary light. So they don't have the same responsibilities. They also don't have access, for example, to the continuous reporting tool later on, because the responsibilities as such stay with the beneficiary that they are linked to. But yeah, as we have put here, consider already now all the possible affiliated entities you may need in the action, because adding them later would mean a grant agreement amendment. Indeed. So now we go a little bit more into details as well after having defined the different terms earlier. So let's look into the work packages. When it comes to work packages, clearly name them matching its description. For example, a work package could be a preparation of the environmental impact assessment. And what would then be the objectives? They would be preparing the documentation for the environmental impact assessment. What could the tasks be? Could be, for example, data collection, drafting of legal documents, and then it comes to defining milestones and deliverables. There we have seen this already on a previous slide. It could be, for example, that one of your milestones could be that you have some contractor selected, or that you have a first set of EIA documents ready for signature. And the deliverable would be then in the end of the work package, for example, a finalized environmental impact assessment documentation. Here we still have some tips for you to structure. It's quite a good practice to think about including a work package number 1 for project management. Here you can centralize all management tasks of the project, and those project management tasks are usually not to be subcontracted. The coordinator is usually the beneficiary who's responsible for this work package. You can also include communication tasks in this work package if it's relevant for your project. And if you don't want to assign any budget for management, simply put a zero budget here. But in any case, remember that there's a limit as well. We have a maximum 10% total costs should be spent on core project management tasks. When it comes to the other work packages, let's call them more as a content work packages. Here it's important to cluster tasks coherently and don't make the action that you're proposing overly complex. We advise, let's say, 3 to 5 work packages on average, reasonable, and more only in specific cases. In any case, when preparing the application, and also in case you're selected for funding and you're preparing a future grant agreement with us, just keep in mind that the level of detail should be balanced, let's say. It's not your daily project management tool, so you can have much more advanced project management tools on the side, other Gantt charts where you're really tracking your progress. But for us, it needs to stay in a balanced and clear way. Let's look into milestones and deliverables again, and also here, as a rule of thumb, like a few advice for you to help you prepare and cluster your action. When it comes to milestones, each work package should have, and that's of course it's a rule of thumb, so let's make sure that it's reasonable in your action, should have at least 2 milestones, and usually, let's say, in the start and in the middle, because as I said before, they're helping to start progress. So with the first milestone, we could see that the work package is basically has started off, is on track, and then towards the middle of the work package duration, you could have another milestone to see that there is progress planned, and you see that the implementation is on track. Let's say there could be 1 milestone every 12 months on average, so that that you can see that that action is running well. The means of verification should be reliable and realistic, and you will see that's part of the application form as well, to define means of verifications. For example, it could be a signature document, it could be a document approved by the board. So those are, for example, typically some verification means. For deliverables, group them as much as possible. So basically, for example, in the end of the task, if it's possible, like define 1 deliverable where you're grouping them on, and so that you don't have hundreds of deliverables, but very reasonable ones when it comes in defining your work packages and the action. So also, as a rule of thumb, each task should have 1 deliverable, and the deliverable is normally at the end of a task, basically marking the end with an achievement, with an output. Milestone and deliverable should also complement each other and not overlap. So when you have a deliverable, you don't need to have a milestone in the same months already anymore. And when it comes to sensitive deliverables, in that case, prefer summaries instead of full deliverables. That would be an acceptable way for us. In the next slide, you will still see an example. For example, here we have a work package about the environmental impact assessment. Here, it was proposed to have 3 milestones: signature of the contract, the EIA progress report, and the EIA approval. And here you see the proposal here would be to not have the 3rd milestone, because it's at the end of of the work package and the end of this respective task here, and it should be better replaced by a deliverable, which would in that case be the environmental impact assessment. So you would not need a milestone in the end, but a deliverable. A few more advice about the quality of the proposal. One advice would be to be really coherent and consistent. Make sure that there's a common thread running through your proposal, which is combining the objectives, work packages, resources, and planning in a way that's coherent with achieving the set deliverables. So it's like a common items that we see always and which could impact the quality. So make sure that the information in one part of the application matches information in another part. So the evaluators will, for example, also cross-check your application and the different forms. So, for example, see that the info in the application form part B is really coherent with your Gantt chart, and then with what you have said before in work packages, milestones, etc. Because otherwise it gets really confusing, and it also would basically impact a good quality of your proposal. Also make sure that the information is presented in a logical way. So, for example, that administrative procedures are presented in a chronological order in the work packages. So, for example, that a basic study is finalized before a design study starts, so that we see there that there's a logic behind it. Then also an aspect which is very important is to be transparent. So, for example, if you apply with a study project, then usually it would be a mix of staff costs and subcontracting. And for a study, it would be no or little purchase of equipment unless in very specific cases, for example, on-site measurements or surveys, and it would normally not entail construction works. But if you apply for a works proposal, then mostly it would be subcontracting and purchase, and unless it's carried out in-house. In the application, don't use any ambiguous language that it's subject to interpretation and it's not so clear for the evaluators. For example, words like pilot or demo, because then it's not really clear, is this a study, is it a work? So that should be more clear in your application. So try to really make here the distinction between studies and works proposals. So very clearly explain what the CEF support will serve for. When it comes to the duration of the project and the start and the end date, when looking at the starting date, the default option is normally that the starting date is the same as the grant agreement signature date, but there are also other options. For example, there could also be a starting date after the grant agreement signature. This is agreed with CINEA during grant agreement preparation. And it could also be that your starting date is before the grant agreement signature date. That's also a case that can be agreed with CINEA during grant agreement preparation. But in any case, the starting date can never be before the submission date. So it cannot be before the 12th March 2026. The closure date of your proposed action must be by the end of December 2030. Let's look into the completeness of documents and what annexes you have to provide in your application. So for one, you have the application form Part A, which is structured data introduced directly in the funding and tenders portal. Then you have the application form Part B. It's a Word document to be filled in and uploaded as a PDF. This one contains a technical description of your project. Then you have the detailed budget table per work package. It's an Excel document to be filled in and annexed, as well as a timetable Gantt chart. You will find a template that you can use under the call documents. So it's a template that we are providing, and you can feel free to use this one or your own template, but you need to include a timetable Gantt chart. Then you have to submit an agreement by the concerned member state, the so-called letter of support. And this one is very specific for the action you propose. So you cannot just, for example, you have applied before, you cannot just reuse the letter of support from a previous submitted action application. You have then also the environmental compliance file, and I'm going to give some more details on this in a moment. And we have already heard about that from Gianluca, the annual activity report, which is the applicant's activity report, not to be mixed up with the CBRS status annual report. And at last here on this slide, there's a list of previous projects, so the key projects for the last 4 years, which is a section in the application form Part B. And additionally, there are necessary documents and annexes to be submitted in case you're submitting a works proposal, which would be an updated full CBA. Then it would be a business plan and other assessments which are showing that the project is non-commercially viable, for example, business plan and financial spreadsheets. And it would be, because it's a work proposal, you're obliged to also submit a fully fledged signed cooperation agreement. Let's indeed look into the environmental compliance file. This one needs to complete it in full for works and for studies with physical intervention. They need to fit in for each applicant and for each member state where the project is implemented. And the competent authority in the member state in question needs to sign this declaration for monitoring of Natura 2000 sites to certify that there's no impact on this area. In case your application is a study without physical intervention, in that case, in the template, you're clicking this relevant option, which is study without physical intervention, which you see there on the slide, and upload the document. So further on for the environmental compliance file, so the expected detail in it depends really on the nature of your action. You see here for study physical intervention, you have a little bit less level of details than if you have a works because it has more impact. So this is really a document to show the action on environmental related elements which emerged from the CBRS status evaluation summary report. And as a rule of thumb, the stronger the concerns, the higher the expectations for the level of details to fill in for this document. Let's look into the agreement by the concerned member states, so the letter of support. This one is signed by the ministry in charge of implementing the future cooperation agreement. And when it comes to member state concerned, this is the member state where the proposed project will be implemented. In case your proposed action is a study without a physical intervention, then the member state concerned would be the country of the applicant. And in case, the specific case, the case of a project associated countries, and the letter of supports need to be signed by the competent authority of the associated country, as well as a neighboring member state. Next slide. So here we're coming to the last part of my presentation, which is still for you, basically a checklist to also for you to have a look in before you're submitting your proposal. So first, look into the scope. Does your proposal really fit into the scope of the call for proposal for which you're applying? So really make sure that the proposed action is addressing the objectives and the results expected from the call. Here you can again consult the call text, and remember that your proposal will only be evaluated against the criteria specified in the call, but only based on the information that you're providing in the application. So yeah, we are not going to request any additional information. The evaluators are going to base their evaluation solely on the information that you provided. Then, as Gianluca said, remember the deadline. Better already work as soon as you can on the application, submit it, and then you can always still change and adapt the proposal by the deadline. Here it's important to really see that the status of the application must be saying submitted. We see here the next slide of the applicant checklist. Make sure that all the sections of the application form Part E are directly encoded in the funding and tenders platform. Read through, complete and upload the application form Part B, which is available as a Word document. You have to fill out and upload as a PDF. Attach all the mandatory annexes that I've presented, depending on if it's studies or a works proposal. And then on the last slide of the applicant's checklist, do a last check, proofread your proposal, and make sure everything is precise and clearly responds to the question asked and demonstrates the added value of the CEF energy funding. So yeah, the application form and templates that are provided in the portal, the use is compulsory. So really make sure that you are using the templates and forms that you're providing you. And with that, you're ready to go, let's say, to submitting a very good and high quality proposal.
Thank you, Teresa. Before I dig into the budget, maybe just one precision on the latest ending date. There's a little typo in one slide. It's 31st of December 2031. So it's 31, but you will see it in the call text on the section 10, page 18, and we'll correct it in the slide we will circulate. So now, again, don't hesitate to write your questions. It's already 3 of them, and we will go through the Q&A, but if you have questions or observations, don't hesitate to use the chat. We will go through the budget or setup of the proposal and some elements related to the procurement. So on the budget, you will see when you work on the portal, basically there are 2 main entry points, the breakdown per cost category that is directly included in the structure part A, and then the breakdown per work package that is included in the Excel detailed table per work package to be uploaded. So Then we'll look at it a bit of across, horizontal element on procurement. But let's see on the breakdown per cost category in the next slide. You have basically 5 categories from A to E: personnel, subcontracting, purchase, other cost categories, and indirect cost. I quote indirect cost because you will see it in the table, but it's for this call, it's not applicable. So it's there only because of constraints on the e-grants environment. But don't use this category. You will see the list anyhow of the available category or eligible category for this call in the call text. But basically revert to personal cost, subcontracting, and purchase. And very limited for other costs. So let's see the table in the next slide. So that's how it look like. You will have one table each time per applicant, and then you can encode the amount for each of the cost category. And again, there you have all the categories, but some are not applicable. So be mindful of this when you will work on your table. So in the next slide, we dig in a little bit in the personal cost. There are basically 4 subcategories there: A1, A2, A3, and 4. The most, by far, the most commonly used is, at least in CEF, is CEF Energy and CBRS Coal is the category A1, the employee, basically staff that is employed by the in the beneficiary directly, or has an equivalent, either a contra or equivalent appointed act. There you can report either actual personal cost or unit cost. This method needs to be decided at the beginning when we do the grant agreement preparation, and cannot be changed halfway through. So it's important to take an informed decision there. Normally, in most of the cases, we have actual personal cost. You may have in category 2 self-employed natural person who work for the action for the beneficiary and are employed under similar condition, not the same, but similar condition to those of an employee. So it's practically an employee in the condition, for example, in the presence in the office, in the working time, in the way it needs to report to superior, etc. But it's not technically having a contract directly with the beneficiary. So this is distinction between A1 and A2. Then we have persons in A3 that are seconded by a third party against payment. In secondment is a special category of staff. And then A4, it's very unlikely because it's basically SME owners, but that means that the beneficiary itself is an SME, which it's quite rare in CBRS projects. Normally we have bigger organization, but in case that's the case, then you could use this category. I invite you to look at the detailed explanation and condition in the so-called annotated grant agreement document, which really contains a lot of information, examples, specific cases on project by project. I'm just posting it in the chat, also the link, and really make use of it. Is a very, very detailed and resourceful document when you want to understand better every single condition of the grant agreement. In the next slide, you see the subcontracting cost on category B. So these are contracts for goods, works, or services that are part of the proposed project task. So when there is a task like a study or APC contract, a specific work, then it's normally, unless it's done in-house, it's normally a subcontracting cost, so a category B. There are cost restriction needs to be in the eligible country unless agreed by the granting authority. Now, normally in subcontracted, basically there are 2 situations. Either the beneficiary is considered a contracting authority or contracted entity, so it's subject to public procurement, EU public procurement. And then there is a whole set of rules, procedure, principle that needs to be followed, that are inscribed in the EU directives and then in the national laws. Or is not considered a contracting authority or contracting entity, but in this case, so for example, if it is a purely private organization, normally it's not considered contracting authority or entity. But also in that case, it's important to ensure sound financial management, and typically for procurement, ensure value for money or lowest price. And to clearly trace it, so that's very important. Then, because it needs to be then demonstrated in the framework of reporting and payment, even more in the case of audits, and no conflict of interest. So there are key horizontal principles that needs to be ensured where we are talking about subcontracted cost. It's not allowed to subcontract to affiliated entities, so this is really important. So in case you have this set up in mind, find alternative solution. Again, in the annotated grant agreement, it's a very detailed source of information for that. In the next slide, you have purchase cost, which sometimes might be a little bit tricky to distinguish with the previous with subcontracting. I'm talking about here C2 and C3. I mean, so C1, it's a travel and subsistence. That's self-explaining. It's really about traveling within the frame of the project. So actual cost only. There is no fixed rate used in CEF, differently from other programs. Now, in terms of equipment, there's again for CEF a specific rule, no depreciation cost. So it's the full cost of the equipment that is eligible. You don't have to apply depreciation. So this is quite an important simplification. At the same time, it needs to be seen really on specific cases when C2 is will be really applicable. Normally, the overall rule of thumb distinction is that when something is done by external sources, like a third party that is not part of the consortium via a procurement, if it is to be to implement a task, an action, then it's by default it goes to subcontracting, so category B. If it is something that is related to specific services that are not directly impacting, not directly delivering a task. For example, typical example is really on communication, where you may have some specialized companies that deliver for you the communication material. Here, usually, it could be more meaningful to have those costs listed in the purchase cost. Again, also in this category, it applies what I said about value for money, conflict of interest, public procurement. It's not because it's in category C that it's not a subcontracting. I mean, it's not a procurement, basically. All the applicable rules apply also in this category. Then in the other cost in the next slide, basically you see it's there, but it's very rare. It's mostly maybe for outermost regions, but so far we don't really have project touching on that areas, and otherwise a series of other type of costs that are usually not eligible in CEF, for example, on purchase or indirect cost. So normally you will not use category D. And then in the next slide, quickly on other ineligible cost, on the VAT is not eligible, in kind is not eligible. I mean, you can declare it, but as a cost neutral, and no cost for separate project website in this framework of this call. Now, quickly going to the next slide on the work packages details. You have an Excel table, some of you know very well, where there are many tabs, and you basically encode one after the other, and it populates the following, depending on the data you have populated earlier on. So there you can encode the cost per work package, and several work packages are obviously possible. in code total per work package per applicant. So basically 1 line per applicant per work package. And per reporting period, you will see there is the distinction between possible 2 or more, 1, 2, 3 or more reporting period. So in the next slide, you can see the main tab. So you start with the picture on the top. So the number 1. Tab number 1 with the basic data, and then number 2 you indicate the work package name and the funding rate. What it's important to know is that whereas the Excel allows you to indicate different funding rates, later on it will not be allowed during grant agreement preparation. So either you put 0 if you don't have a budget for a given work package, but otherwise the default option is that every work package has the same funding rate, so 50% normally. Then the participant in the third tab, you indicate the name of the participant, and then you have the main tab to populate, which is the one in the center, detailed budget table per work package, where you can pick the work package, the participant, and indicate the amount per reporting period. There is a control tab as well that verifies the correspondence between what you indicated in part A and part N in this Excel. Now, point here of the attention, it's about basically ensuring coherences, because we have seen many times that totals would not match between the different tables. So there, it's a basic advice, but it's always good because indeed that happens, and happens of course because sometimes you start working and then you update certain area of the application form, you forget to update the other area. So understandable, but it's a problem in the evaluation stage. Then for the reporting period, maybe a quick information that normally a project duration that is up to 36 months normally gets 1 reporting period, and above that there might be 2 or more. Good to know, but will be anyhow worst case will be corrected during the grant agreement preparation. So next slide's on the procurement and my final set. We're running a little bit late, but in 3 minutes I think I'll done. On the public procurement aspect, we said it many times. If you are subject to public procurement, well, you know what you have to do. It's the whole set of rules. But if not, it's not that you are not concerned, because it's public funding that you will receive. So some financial management principles will need to be respected. Value for money, no conflict of interest. So this is something that is very scrutinized during the reporting and payment, during audits. So it's really, really important to get it right. Eventually to do it more, or what you maybe were like, so better be even overly diligent on that than do it less. Yeah, that's the message. Because then of course, if a whole procurement or if a whole contract is considered not respecting the rules, it might be the whole contract might be even be considered ineligible, and this really hurts a lot. On the next slide, you will see, I will not go through all the details because I mostly partly touched upon. You will have the slide deck, and it's good to go through or even to circulate internally when it will be the moment to take those decisions. It's very important to ensure some financial management, transparency in the publication, equal treatment, non-discrimination, and that you can trace it and demonstrate that you applied those principles, because in many cases actually the problem is also this, is the traceability of it and the possibility to demonstrate. Last slide is a plea to use as much as possible, as detailed as possible, the public procurement section in the subcontracting section, rather, I should say, of the work plan in the application form on section 6.2. You have plenty of space to detail what you will have to do. I mean, which are the contracts foreseen for the future, which are the contracts already started, what are the procedure, what is the state of play, and so on and so forth. And the last, it's a reminder at the next slide on the anti-fraud strategy, and you have information in case you want to report a fraud. Hopefully that's not needed, but it's always good to raise attention to that. With excuse to Louisa, as we're running late, but take your time. I think we can sleep a little bit over noon as well with the Q&A. We will look at it, the model grant agreement, and then we wrap it up with the Q&A. We've seen many more questions, so we'll try to answer it after this last presentation. Over to you, Louisa.
Yes, thank you, Gianluca. Good morning on my side as well. So for the final session of the Info Day, we will look at the Model Grant Agreement, or the MGA. This is the rule book for your project. The document may seem a little bit technical, but this is what makes your project legally solid and ensures your funding is protected. So my goal today is to walk you through the main points to help you understand what it means for you and your team and your work with CINEA. And as Gianluca mentioned earlier, you can find it in the Funding and Tenders portal under the reference documents, as well as the call page. So what is the grant agreement and what does it include? It is your contract, the contract you sign with CINEA. It sets the rules for funding, for project implementation, and for reporting. So under it, you have very clear rights. You are entitled to receive EU funding under the agreed terms. You own your project results. And if something changes, you can request an amendment to the grant agreement. But of course, those rights come with obligations. So you must implement the project according to Annex 1, which is a description of the action, or DOA, as you will hear later on. You must submit reports as planned, and you must display the EU emblem and funding reference on any communication, materials, or equipment financed by the project. Well, remember, a key financial reminder, you will never receive more than the maximum grant amount set in the GA, and if your final costs are lower than those budgeted, your payment will be adjusted accordingly. So in short, the grant agreement defines not just what you get, but also what you commit to deliver. And next slide, please. So how does it look like? It is fully digital, first of all. So everything from signature to closure happens through the Funding and Tenders portal. And the document is based on the corporate model grant agreement, which is used across the European Commission. It has a core part setting out the general rules and has also several annexes that include specific details for your action. So for CEF, Annex 5 is especially important because it covers additional rights and obligations, such as security in Article 13, intellectual property rights in Article 16, communication and dissemination activities in Article 17, and member state information and durability in Article 18. So those last two really matter in practice because under Article 17, you must present your project publicly on your website or social media with key details and the EU flag. Also, you need to put up plaques or billboards when work starts and a permanent commemorative plaque once the project is completed. And you also need to upload your public results to the CEF project results platform via the portal. Then under Article 18, you must keep the member states that support your project action informed about your project's progress. And also you must ensure durability, meaning that any equipment fully financed by the action must continue to serve its purpose for at least 5 years after the project ends, or until it reaches the end of its economic lifespan, whichever is earlier. So these provisions account for ensure transparency, accountability, and also help us have long-term value for the EU investment. And how you can participate. Let's look who can participate in the grant agreement in the next slide. So we can have a few possible roles, be it beneficiary, affiliated entity, associated partner, and subcontractor. This is to note that associated partner has not been a feature under CEF so far, but every one of them have a very specific and different relationship with CINEA and different responsibilities. So let us see what these mean in practice. So starting with beneficiary under Article 7 of the GA. So they sign the grant agreement and hold all the rights and obligations. If there are more than one beneficiaries, one of them becomes the coordinator. Teresa explained what you have to think about when you designate a coordinator for the action. The other beneficiaries must sign the accession form in Annex 3 through the portal within 30 days of the grant agreement's entry into force. And also keep in mind that a consortium agreement is recommended, though it's not mandatory, to help you manage internal arrangements smoothly. For affiliated entities under Article 8 of the grant agreement, they must meet eligibility and non-exclusion criteria. They carry out specific tasks described in Annex 1 and can declare eligible costs under the same rules as the beneficiaries. And they must have a legal or a capital link with the beneficiary that is not limited to the project alone. So if an affiliated entity breaches its obligations, it is treated just like a beneficiary breach, and recovery of undue payments happens through the beneficiary. Now let's go to associated partners, which in the grant agreement, in the model grant agreement, you can see that they implement certain project tasks that are listed in Annex A. They cannot claim costs, so their work is not reimbursed by the grant, and they still have to comply with all relevant obligations and can be linked either to one beneficiary or to the consortium. For the subcontractors under Article 9.3, they deliver specific project tasks that are necessary for the implementation, but they do not deliver the project's core management. Their price can include a profit margin and is declared as subcontracting costs in the financial statement. And as Gianluca mentioned, procurement must follow the principles of sound financial management, that is best value for money, transparency, and no conflict of interest. So the beneficiaries must ensure that associate partners and subcontractors respect core obligations. So proper implementation, confidentiality, ethics, visibility, and audit rights as well, with respect to the bodies mentioned in Article 25, such as OLAF and the European Court of Auditors. So better think of subcontracting as the fact that you outsource a task and not outsourcing responsibility, because the beneficiary who outsources remains fully accountable. Now, let's have a look at the consortium itself and the internal roles and responsibilities. So the coordinator is key. Their tasks cannot be delegated or subcontracted to any other entity. So they monitor the proper implementation of the action. They act as the single communication channel with CINEA and submit the pre-financing guarantee, if any. They submit the deliverables and reports, and they distribute payments to other beneficiaries without delay. Meanwhile, the beneficiaries have to keep the registration information updated, as in Article 19. They need to inform CINEA and the consortium about any significant changes or any delays that might occur. They have to submit to the coordinator in good time the pre-financing guarantee, the financial statements, the certificates, and the technical inputs. And they also need to provide information related to their affiliated entities. So even though the coordinator leads, beneficiaries carry their own share of responsibility. For affiliated entities, first of all, they do not sign the grant agreement, but in practice, they are treated much like beneficiaries. The beneficiary stays fully responsible for the work carried out by its affiliated entities and for recovering any undue payments from them. Then, affiliated entities need to have a legal or capital link, and it can take several forms. So it can be a permanent legal structure like a federation or network. It can be a contractual cooperation that goes beyond the very single project. And they can have a capital link where one organization controls the other, as defined in EU law, Directive 2013-34 of the EU. Now, going to subcontractors. They come into play when you need specific expertise or services. Remember again that subcontracting is about execution and not for management. So beneficiaries keep full responsibility and must follow fair, transparent procurement principles that show best value for money and no conflicts of interest. And for example, you could hire an external company to carry out a technical study that forms part of the project parts in Annex 1. Then for reporting, next slide, please. Thank you. It's described in Article 21, and under this article, the project is divided into reporting periods set out in the datasheet. So all reports must be in English, and we have two main types. First, the continuous reporting, which is through the portal, and this serves to provide regular updates and also to submit the deliverables. And then we have the periodic reports, which are submitted within 60 days after the end of each reporting period, and they combine the technical and the financial part. So as required in Annex 5, remember you must also share these reports with a member state that supports your action. Going into the payment arrangements, remember that all payments will be made to the coordinator. Pre-financing. This is paid within 30 days of entry of the grant agreement into force or after the financial guarantee if it is required. Then we have interim payments. Those reimburse eligible costs for each reporting period up to 90% of the maximum grant. And then we have the final payment, which is the balance, which covers the rest of eligible costs and ensures the no profit rule is respected. So remember that if your requested EU contribution is more than 325,000 euros, you will need to submit a certificate on the financial statement. And again, remember that the coordinator is responsible for ensuring everything is submitted correctly, including the financial statements from affiliated entities. Then amendments. What something needs to change. This is described in Article 39 of the grant agreement, and it says that any amendment must be submitted through the portal with justification and supporting documents. The amendment cannot alter the nature of the grant or affect the equal treatment of applicants. And it must be requested before the final balance payment, so while the grant agreement is still in force. Then there is also the possibility that the grant agreement is reduced, suspended, or terminated, either by the beneficiary or by the agency. And these provisions are described in Article 28, 31, and 32 of the grant agreement. So CINEA may take these measures if there are serious breaches, irregularities, or fraud, if there is non-compliance with obligations or call conditions, or if there are major delays that risk the project's objective. Beneficiaries, on the other hand, can request suspension or termination in exceptional cases, such as force majeure. Again, this will be done through the portal. So, to wrap up, here is what you should remember from today. Please know your role and your responsibilities, be it beneficiary, coordinator, affiliated entity, or subcontractor. Keep communication and reporting on track. Please ensure compliance with Articles 11 to 20. Use amendments responsibly, and monitor your affiliated entities and subcontractors carefully. So understanding these rules protects EU funding and helps your project succeed. So thank you for listening. So I think now it's time for the floor to questions.
Thank you, Luisa, also for this walkthrough through the grant agreement, which I think it also touched upon some of the questions that I was we can see in the chat. So let's see, maybe it partly answered to some of your questions, and if not, we can further elaborate. So, so I propose now to really go through the question in the chat. So first of all, those that are in the chat, and then we'll take it one by one, and then if there are and if anyone wants to also raise, directly speak and prefers to take the floor, we can also take a few minutes also from direct questions there. So the first question was about another info day. I replied in the chat in case you haven't seen. Normally there's no other info day, but what another important support is the Q&A question and answer session list, sorry, which is already available in the funding and tender portal. So if you go in the call page, there is a long list of questions and answers that we have uploaded, taking stock of recurring questions from the previous calls. So I think already there you can find a lot of answers. But if you don't find the answer in none of the material available, you can always get back to us via email, to the email that is indicated also in the call text. Then if we see that there are many questions and there may be a need for it, we we may organize also a Q&A session later on, probably in January, so a few months before, a couple of months before the deadline, so that all applicants are at that point in time very advanced in their elaboration of the proposal. So you may have indeed more detailed questions. So we may organize it or not. If we don't see lots of questions and we don't see the need, we don't do it. But if you feel the need, also please get in touch with us. You can also propose it actively to have one, and that will be, of course, open to everyone. Then there was a question from Lisa about the connection fees related to TSO connection fees. Also answered that. There is a Q&A there in the portal. So in principle, it is eligible, but there are some conditions for that. Question, I think, from Anna regarding priority and urgency. So if I understand correctly, but please feel free to further reply. The question is obviously the action that is proposed, in particular in studies, they may be a little bit far away from really directly contributing to the EU targets on renewables or decarbonization, etc. So we look at how the project situates in this trajectory of the project, so the action that is proposed, but obviously when there is a study proposal, we don't expect in the priority and urgency that the concretely, directly with the action contributes to achieving these targets. But I don't know if I'm off topic, Anna, if you want to, is it this the question or you want to complement?
More or less, thank you. The same question also applies to other topics, because we have the CBRES project, is it? The cross-border renewable energy project, and then we have the projects we are applying for under this forthcoming call. It was not clear for me to differentiate, because we have the purposes of the CBRES project, of course, which are in line with what all we have said, but then we have the project itself or action that you are now applying for, which has purposes in regard the other project.
Mm-hmm.
So one is the overall purpose of the CBRES project, the other is the project of the study we are applying for now inside the overall project.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not clear for me if the purpose we should be describing, it seemed like being the purpose of the overall CBRES project and not for the action itself.
Okay.
Maybe.
No. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. It helps. So it needs to focus on the action you're proposing. So the evaluation will focus on the action that you're asking for funding. So the overall description, the purpose, the aims, the objectives, the task, all of that needs to refer to the action itself. What I was referring in my presentation when I'm talking about the wider picture is that obviously the action that you propose will contribute to achieve or to make a step forward of the overall CBRES project. So it's a tiny piece of the puzzle of our wider picture. But the action that you propose is the one that is being submitted for funding, not the overall status project. Okay. All right. Then there is also I think from Anna on the consortium. So here we look. So please explain what is exactly is considered as a consortium. So do we refer to the CBRES status beneficiary or not? So no, the consortium we're talking about is really those who are applying for the action, which may be different from those that are part of the what we call project promoter of the CBRS status, and in case they differ, we need to have the proof that that the project promoter of the CBRS status agree with these applicants in their project. So, but it can differ, and we did have cases where there were partly difference between the two stage. But when we talk about consortium, it's really those who are applying for funding. Then question from yeah, is it fine? Yeah. Okay, Dennis from regarding the a little bit a question about successive phases of the project. So in cases where you have a first and then a second phase, where basically there is a sort of a control point if on gate, and then the project goes ahead or not, depending of the first phase. There's, I mean, nothing prescribes in favor or against. There are projects that have submitted with this in mind, so there is a sort of sequential application where you have maybe work package 1, okay, management usually, but work package 2 is about a stage of the study, and then when the work package 2 is done, it triggers the possibility to go ahead with work package 3, etc. So you may have this, or you may have overlapping non-sequential type of different studies. It really depends on the project, and if that's the configuration you're looking for, it's perfectly feasible. Now, what is and I think it's linked to another question you have about what happens if yeah, on the termination regarding yeah, if it doesn't go ahead. Yeah, it's linked to the same question here with what happens. Are there financial penalties or not? Not necessarily, in the sense that if phase 1 it's about a certain study and then the project doesn't go ahead because the result of the study 1, 2, and 3 shows that the project is not viable and is not worth going ahead and doing other studies, in that case it would be considered a project termination or a reduction of scope. So technically, of course, the grant that was foreseen for the other part that is not implemented will be reduced accordingly, but it doesn't automatically triggers the ineligibility of the first part itself. The eligibility rules apply. The eligibility rules applies as normally. So if you have done a certain number of studies that were in line with the eligibility rules of the programs, EU rules, national rules, procurement we have talked about, etc. So you can still well, reduce the scope of the project in eventually via an amendment, and then submit the cost incurred until then. But it really depends on the situation. But if the costs are eligible, it doesn't necessarily trigger a what would you call a penalty, so an ineligibility of those costs incurred. It would be rather potentially a scope reduction and potentially a termination. Maybe I link it with the other question from Dennis on the termination. Then you let me know if it was sufficiently clear. So in case of national level withdrawal, one member state stops co-funding, can the other continue implementing under the amended mono-beneficiary grant agreement for studies, for example? Again, I think here I need to say it depends. The termination on one side doesn't trigger the termination on the other side automatically, as much as it doesn't trigger the ineligibility of cost incurred until that moment. Now we need to see the case, because if the termination on one side trigger the inability of the other side to go ahead to pursue the objective, then whether it doesn't make sense to go ahead with the action because the objective of the project would be compromised, and we would eventually decide to stop altogether the project, or there might be an amendment as you evoke as a scenario where one of the two parties stops, and then we would have a mono beneficiary. Yes, that's an option. And during the amendment, you can have dropping of consortium member for whatever reason, and maybe a reduced project going ahead. But it really depends on the situation whether it makes sense to go ahead with the given project. All right, just checking if it was all right for you, Dennis, and otherwise you feel free to complement, and otherwise I'm going.
Absolutely, thank you very much.
Yeah,
It was perfect.
yeah,
Thank you for the
fine.
answer.
Okay, good. All right. Then I think we, if I'm not mistaken, we still have one question on the written declaration from the member state expressing a willingness to conclude a cooperation agreement signed by the ministry of the participating member state in charge of implementing the cooperation agreement could be in form of a joint declaration of intent, or should it be a cooperation agreement that includes statistical transfer, distribution, cost sharing eventually, all these way. We are talking about works application here. I can provide already an element of answer, but I don't know if Victor want to step in from DGNR. If you are still with us.
I'm still there. Yeah, please
yeah.
start, Gianluca, and I will complement.
Okay, so on the works application, indeed, we do request a cooperation agreement signed by the parties. There's no prescription in exactly the form. So you know, how is the contractual form taking place, because it really depends also on different member state, but we sort of look at it as a binding or a real agreement, not just a preliminary one, knowing that of course in this type of agreement there can be several steps. So you know, you can have a preliminary agreement on certain elements, but you may not have on all of them, depending on the level of maturity, and you may decide then to go ahead, you know, in the following year with an amendment or you know, an annex that complements with further details, etc. But in a way, I would not consider it because you apply for works as a final agreement, because there can always be further elements to be defined later on when the project is really sort of finalized. But we would expect a binding agreement between the parties. That's my first reaction, but we can further complement also via Q&A and come back to that. Victor, do you want to add anything on that?
Oh, thank you, Gianluca. I think you provided the essence of what our expectations on this one. So the format is rather flexible, but there's certainly a need for commitment from the ministries of the participating member states that will be in charge of implementing the cooperation agreement. There are elements that are prescribed by the Renewable Energy Directive as regards the content of this cooperation agreement. So I invite you to again look into the relative articles, depending on which cooperation agreement is chosen by the member states. And we certainly want the projects to be underpinned by one of these cooperation mechanisms. So it's a requirement for the eligibility of funding. So yeah, provides the latest document that you have at your disposal, as the call text says. And once you advance further with the member states on this cooperation agreement, please update the documentation with CINEA.
Thank you, Victor. Hope it was a complete answer. Otherwise, please, Monica, you can also take the floor if you need. Yeah, looks good. Yeah. Okay. Then I see a question from Dorota about specifically about subcontracted to affiliated entities. So, so the subcontracting is why subcontracting is not possible to affiliated entity is basically because affiliated entity, they don't charge a price, they declare the cost like a beneficiary. So if you subcontract, so it's via tender, and the tender, it provides with an offer, and then it will provide invoices, and this offer contains the notion of cost, of price, sorry, of market price, if you like, and that's not possible for affiliated entity, because in the affiliated entities they are treated as they are as beneficiary. So just to clarify, affiliated entity can subcontract, so they can do their own subcontracting, but the beneficiary cannot subcontract within the consortium to affiliated entity. Now, if that's one of the possible business scenario, that the affiliated entity takes over the contract, then it would be better not to have it in the consortium and they participate to the tender. But of course, then you need to ensure some financial management, transparency, non-discrimination, etc. It's always tricky to give a contract to an affiliated entity, because it's very difficult to demonstrate that there is no discrimination, equal opportunity, etc., because they have inevitably inside information, or they can be perceived as such. So, but okay, if they are not affiliated entity in the consortium, they could participate to public procurement or to tenders in general, but I would refrain. I would refrain to do that, even in the case they are not in the consortium, because it's tricky to demonstrate that the rules were respected. So maybe to come back quickly on the previous point on cooperation agreement, just to be crystal clear, and I think in the part from Teresa it was, but just always good to repeat on this crucial aspect. For both studies and works proposal, you need to at least submit a letter of support. That is in the one from the template that you find in the call text from the relevant parties. If you apply for works, in addition to a letter of support, you will have to have a cooperation agreement. So these are two different things. The cooperation agreement, again, may evolve over time, and you may have, it's possible that you don't have all the elements at the moment of the works proposal. Also because in some cases, the works proposal, when you apply for work proposal, you may not have the final setup of the project. So, the exact technology of the overall project, the capacity, all of that has an important has an impact in the future statistical transfer, cost benefit, cost sharing, etc. So it can be defined later on, but it would be important to have some sort of provisions there, at least some principles that member states agree to follow in future, but to be defined later on. Okay. I think we went through all the questions in the chat. We are a little bit later than scheduled, but if there are another one or two questions from participants, don't hesitate. I'll just wait another few seconds just to check if anyone's wishes to clarify any of the elements. Doesn't look like. Okay. It was dense. I hope it was not too much, but it was useful. We will, as said at the beginning, send you via email the slide deck, the registration of the event, recording, if you want to go back to some of the explanations. You will also receive a link to the video on the tutorial done by Maria on how to apply. This will be useful in a couple of months' time or 3 months' time, but keep it for you as in your toolkit, a survival toolkit. Have a look at your at the Q&A in the tender funding tender portal. I think there are about 60 or 50, quite a number of them. So it should be already helpful to guide you. And on our side, as soon as we have updates, for example, entering into force of the new list, things that like that, of course, we will keep you informed as it goes. So wish you all the best. Good luck with your application. Nice to see you all numbers here today, and stay in touch if there is a need for. Many thanks, everyone.